Hey everyone, it's Jim
and Charles
from Mellow Amps, and in MTA episode number 18 we're going to be talking about a whole bunch of really fun things. We're going to do the whole kit lineup, or the basic lineup. We'll talk in brief about each of the kits. We're going to answer a whole bunch of really common questions we get from customers because we're going to be really busy for the next couple of weeks shipping kits. So we're going to try to get those questions out of the way right away. And before we get started, first caution everyone, electronics and tube amplifiers can have very high voltages present, which can be lethal. Exercise extreme caution when working around them. Always consult a professional technician when in doubt. Okay, Charles, now we have some really great news about for our U.S. customers about tariffs.
Yeah, okay, so we have applied for and we received exemptions for all of our kit amps and any tubes that were made in Canada or the U.S. So the tariffs no longer apply to them whenever we're shipping. And this is fantastic news because it's been a real pain lately. The stuff that should have been exempt, we were having to charge for anyway with our previous carrier, and then you'd get refunded afterwards, but that's not happening anymore. We're just not going to get charged. It's just like the good old days, at least if it's US or Canadian made tube or one of our kit amplifiers.
Now the kits are exempt under CUSMA, that's the free trade agreement, because they are proudly designed and manufactured in Canada.
Yeah.
So.
And a quick note about that, some kits require accessories that are optional with them. So for example, our Phono Preamp requires a switch mode power supply, but you can get it yourself. But if you are going to order it, make sure you order the power supply at the same time, the switch mode power supply, or power cords or things like that. Otherwise, they will have a tariff charge applied to them. They have to be bundled with the kit.
Right. And before we get into the fun, you should have, if you're a returning customer of either Valves and More or MTA, you should have received an email blast by now with a store credit. And if you haven't, just drop us a note in the contact page and we'll forward you the email. And if you stay to the very end of today's episode, we'll show you how you can try, because it's not a guarantee, you can try and boost your store credit by 50%, so it's well worthwhile. Okay, well, let's get started with...
Actually, one more note on store credits. You can actually use them more than once. You just have to do more than one order.
That's actually coming. That's in the questions. You're jumping ahead, Charles. Okay, let's get going. Okay, first question that we're going to get a lot of, we're just anticipating this question, is can I use more than one store credit? And the answer is yes. But if let's say you wanted to order the Universal Phono Preamp and you'd like to have a Control Preamp to go with it, so you're starting to build a complete system, just make two orders. Order the Phono Preamp, take a store credit, and order on a separate order the Rocket and take a store credit. Same with the monoblocks. If you order a pair of monoblocks, if you're listening in stereo, and most of us are, you're going to want two monoblocks, right? So do two separate orders and then you can have two store credits. Okay, what's the next question we've got? Oh, we get this all the time. Okay, so Jim and Charles, you say your kits have audiophile grade sound. Maybe not, $100,000 audio grade sound, but they get you into audiophile sound. And yeah, that's true. They all will meet what an audiophile would consider that sonic quality or profile. So how
do we do it for such a good price, basically?
Yeah, because audiophile, I'm just reading over here. Audiophile sound costs thousands, doesn't it? And that is true, it does. But a big part of the cost of a piece of audiophile grade equipment is the chassis. And you can add at least $1,000 to the cost of an amplifier or a preamplifier, whatever your audio gear is, if you put a fancy, high quality chassis on the gear.
And we spent literally years trying to make a chassis that looked good and was inexpensive to produce.
So there's a couple of things. First of all, you've got to build the kit yourself. Now we will do a pro build, and we do them at a very reasonable price, but we fit those in gaps when we have time. So it depending on how busy you are, it can take as little as 2 weeks, or right now it probably take over a month because we're just going to be so busy shipping kits. And the pro builds, we build absolutely the best kit we possibly can. I do a lot of the pro builds, and I'm always trying to improve the build on each generation. The differences aren't that huge, but it's just a lot of fun to see if I can best the last kit I built. But if you want that price, the good price, you've got to build it yourself.
And that's half the fun.
It can be a lot of fun. You also have to assemble the chassis yourself. So you have to make the chassis. We give you the parts, but you got to put it together. And the other thing that we do that's really different than the industry is today, most money from a large audio manufacturer is spent on advertising. And then it's spent on chassis. And then it's spent on the website. Now, we're lucky because Charles is a computer guy, and that was his career before I convinced him to join the companies. So he does an amazing job with the websites. But we put almost all of the money into the actual circuit itself, the design, the quality of the components. We put a little bit of money into the chassis, and we put zero money into advertising and no big bucks into the chassis. And we have no middleman. You're buying direct from the manufacturers. Well, Charles and I are the manufacturers.
Yeah. So most of the money is essentially going into the sound quality and what matters for it.
Yeah. So even if you got lots of bucks in the bank, you can keep most of those bucks and go with something that maybe it's not as fancy as a high-end chassis, but it will sound as good or better because we put our focus on the sound. Okay, let's get into talking about the individual kits. And I think that was the last question. Or was there? Oh yeah, there was one more question. It always pays to check the script. I'm a beginner. What kit would be best to start with? Well, that's a no-brainer. The Rocket. It's the least expensive of our kits. It's
the simplest to build.
It's the simplest to build. As you can see, it's on a fairly small chassis. In fact, we just went to version 2.0 and made some small revisions to the circuit board. The circuit is the same circuit as we designed. Well, it's a couple of years ago now, I think.
Yeah, but we've made some small improvements to the ground topology and some big improvements to the labeling that will make it even easier for new builders to put it together.
Yeah, so it is a double-sided board like all of our boards, so there are components on both sides. But for a beginner, it's not dead easy in the sense that you can snap it together really quickly like, a 500-piece Lego set. But if you can focus for about 30 minutes at a time, you can turn your phone off and you can follow the build series. The build series is filmed. We actually build the entire kit from start to finish, episode by episode. We've gotten quite good at breaking the episodes down into short little sections. In fact, we try for 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Sometimes they're really complicated. They might go 15.
Easy to fit in whenever you have a few minutes during the day to watch a segment and then do that little part of the build. And in no time, you'll have a kit put together.
And the best part about building the Rocket is that even though it's a fairly simple kit and it's a very simple circuit, at the end of the day, you'll have a fantastic sounding control preamp that you could put this into a very high-end system and you would never find anything lacking about it.
And it gives you a huge number of options for tube rolling too, which we really love.
Okay, well we'll get going with a quick detailed look at each and every one of these kits in the coming segments, and we'll see you in just a second. Okay, let's run through what we call the modern line, and we actually have spent the last 2 years developing the modern line. And when we're done the modern line, we're going to go back in time and we'll look at the classic line because we've made quite a few of those kits available again. So let's start back where we just finished with the Rocket. The Rocket is a control preamp, and what a control preamp is basically a piece of gear that goes in between your source and your amplification. And in this case, we've got 2 pairs of RCA coming in with a switchable little mini switch.
So that allows you to switch your sources out. Say you have a digital source and a phono preamp like we do. You can switch back and forth between them.
And then you've got 1 pair of RCAs coming out. We got a lot of questions. How come the jacks are on the top instead of the back? Well, as you can see, there's not a lot of room on the back, but we could have put it into a bigger chassis and would have increased the cost. But the real reason why the RCA jacks are up mounted really close to the tubes, well, that should give you a hint, because the input grid of the tube between the RCA input jack and the input grid of the tube is a vulnerable piece of territory, because the signal coming in is going to be very low. If it's coming off a phono preamp, it might be 1 volt RMS. If it's coming in off of a DAC, it might be about 1 volt RMS. And
we want as little distance as possible between the input and the tubes.
Yeah, so you'll have very low resistance, you'll have very low capacitance. Think about, patch cords, for example. Do you want your RCA patch cords as long as possible? No, you want them as short as possible. Absolutely. And the same thing goes here, but it's even more vulnerable because inside here is a power supply, which is noisy, and that's a huge advantage. You'll see this design topology constantly in our kit designs, and it will make a lower noise floor automatically through design. It's essentially a freebie, so why not grab it? The other thing that a control preamp does is it controls the volume, which makes perfect sense. So, and typically a control preamp will give you a substantial amount of gain. So you take a low audio signal in, and you'll control it and bring it up to the level you want to listen at.
Yeah, now these aren't always necessary. If you have a power amplifier or an integrated amplifier that you're planning on feeding with a control preamp, you may end up with way too much gain going into it, and that could raise your noise floor. So pay attention to what you're running for a power amplifier. If it has its own gain stages, if it requires a very low level signal input, a control preamp might not be right for you.
Or a lower gain control preamp. And we don't have any lower gain control preamps in the modern line, but we do in the classic line. So we'll talk about those in a minute. This preamp uses the lovely 6N1P-EV and a whole host of other tubes. So it's, in many ways, it's a universal preamp because it can use, what, a dozen or more
something
types
like that.
Of tubes?
Yeah, a huge number. Anything on the 6DJ8 style bass, I believe that's the B9A or B9B bass. As long as it's a 6-volt tube, it'll run it.
Yeah, and the 6N1P has a very open, clean, clear sound, which is unique in the entire world of tubes. We rarely see a tube that sounds like that. I would say the closest vintage tube that we have is the Marconi 6SN7s. They have sort of an open sound to them as well, in which there seems to be this kind of air or space around the instruments and vocals that you don't hear anywhere else. And we follow that up with the 6N6P as a cathode follower, or typically these days people call it a CF stage. And what that does is give us very low impedance on the output to drive the next stage. But the 6N6P, I hate crooked tubes. The 6N6P can push current, and in the cathode's follower stage, it's doing a tiny little bit of that, and we've tried a lot of tubes in the CF stage, and wow, the 6N6P just blows everything out of the water. So this can make a huge difference, particularly in the bass frequencies. Okay, enough of the Rocket. Let's move on to the Universal Phono. Okay, one of our most popular kits ever has been the Universal 6 or 12 SL7 Phono Preamp. And we had a classic line version of this.
That was also really popular.
And we updated it. We switched the cathode follower over to the 6N6P that we were just talking about.
As soon as we realized just how good it was.
Yeah. And the 6SN7 does a good job as a follower, but the 6N6P is superior. The difference is only really in the very low frequencies, I find. But the secret to this is that it's an all-tube phono preamp. And a lot of phono preamps, the vast majority are solid state. Many of the ones that are tube are actually tube and solid state.
And they're using feedback and other strange topologies. And this is a passive RIAA equalization circuit. And it just makes a huge difference for it.
Yeah, it's a very natural musical sounding preamp. And the secret to that is the designers. No, I'm just kidding. I wish we could take credit for it. The secret is actually the gain tube. So we're using the 6SL or 12SL7 tube. You can switch between, it's a universal type preamp because you can switch between a 6 volt and a 12 volt filament just by plugging in a different switch mode power supply in the back. That's the only thing you have to do. And you'll keep the cathode follower in place.
Because it's running on its own AC filament supply.
Yeah. And the 6SL7s and the 12SL7s, in particular the Sylvanias, it just is such a lively musical sounding tube. It's everything a designer could dream of. And most of the tube world is using the 12AX7, which is a little higher gain tube, but in my opinion, it sounds very flat, and that's typical for the 12AX7s. So that's the musicality. Sure, we did a lot of work to make sure that we kept the noise floor down because there's an incredible amount of gain. There's 2 gain stages with an EQ stage in between, and if we inject any noise anywhere in the signal path, even a very, very small amount, it's going to get amplified twice. And as a result, this thing has the most amazing filter stages you'll ever see in a power supply. Short of a piece of gear that costs $10,000 or $20,000. So we've been really happy with this. You're going to see, Charles is going to be popping some reviews up on the screen as we go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, our customers are really happy with it too, so you'll be seeing those come up.
Yeah, so if you're not really sure about a kit, the store listings have a huge amount of detail, including the actual owner's manual is in there for a free download. The schematics are in there, the complete schematics. I don't know if anybody else gives away the complete schematics.
Maybe not willingly.
Not really. So we put them in there. They're in color. They're easy to read. There's a whole build series. You can actually start the build series if you're not sure, if you're up to it, so you can get a good sense of what's involved. And if you're really wondering if the sound is for you, read the reviews. The reviews for all of our kits were mostly written by test builders, but later on, other kit builders will jump in there and put in a review. And the reviews for all of our kits are just wonderful. That's how we advertise. That's the only way we've been ever advertised, and it's how the business is growing. Okay, let's move on to the last of the modern line kits.
Okay, so here we have our latest in the modern line. This is our OTL headphone power amplifier.
What does OTL stand for?
Output transformer less. So that means we don't have any output transforms between the tubes and your headphones.
So does that mean we have the high voltage connected straight up to your cans? That would be really dangerous.
It would be very exciting. And we've done something very different with this amplifier compared to a lot of OTLs that are out there, in that we don't have a gain stage or a driving stage built into it. And we've also doubled up on our output tubes. These are the wonderful 6080s. The older version of them is called the 6AS7, and they often come in the larger Coke bottle style.
That looks really cool.
That looks really cool. And by doubling them up like this, what we've done is we've really lowered the output impedance. And the output impedance on an OTL system matters a ton because it tells you what kind of headphones you can run with it. These are some Sennheiser HD 660s, and they are around 150 ohms. And they also go up to, I think, 300 and 600. And this will go all the way down to 80.
That's the official specification, but it technically will go as low as 75 ohms without any bass roll off.
Then that's the problem. The lower you go with your headphone impedance, the more you roll off the low frequencies, and it can get really dramatic if you have a strong mismatch with them.
Yeah.
So this will run the vast majority of headphones that are out there.
Yeah. And what do you get sonically from the OTL headphone amp? You get a pure Class A circuit, and you get it's a very, very short signal path, and as a result, the sound it's almost like you're in the studio.
It's incredibly open and clear,
and it's extremely detailed, without any of the edge that you'll get in solid state. It's a pure Class A circuit. In fact, all of our kits are pure Class A. Pure just means there's no feedback. Feedback can really start to muddy up the signal. In solid state gear, almost every circuit has to have at least a small amount of feedback. Many of them quite a bit of feedback. And for those of you who don't know what feedback is, you're basically taking the signal from a later stage and bringing it back. That's why we call it feedback.
And it can be positive or it can be negative, but either way, it's mixing in a little bit of the later signal in with the earlier signal, and we don't like to do that. We've experimented with it. It's just never worked out well. It's never sounded good.
Yeah. So if you're into headphones or you're on a budget and you want the simplest audiophile system you can, and you can't afford awesome speakers, and any audiophile system has to have awesome speakers. There's no way around it.
You can get some awesome headphones.
You can get some awesome headphones, and a really high quality set of headphones can cost 10% of a really high quality set of speakers, or even less. So you can get into this kind of a setup for a reasonable amount of money. Now, if you want this to sound at its best, you should drive it with a preamp, unless your DAC has a built-in high-quality preamp that has some decent gain to it. But yeah, if clarity and immediacy of the sound with some musicality and some of that tube warmness is your thing, then you'll love this. Okay, so that takes us through the modern line, and I think we should reset the table, and we'll bring out the classic line, and we'll do a quick run through of those kits as well.
Yeah, we'll be right back.
Okay, we're going to do the classic line in two segments. We'll do the preamps first, and then we'll bring out the power amps. Now, years ago, when I was building my own gear, basically prototypes or one-offs, I started building on this type of a chassis with cherry wood plinths and a really thick top plate. In fact, we actually brought a top plate out. This is the E80cc top plate to show you.
Probably thicker than just about any top plates that are out there.
And I started off building with a thick top plate for a couple of reasons, and I ended up discovering a secret of design topology that we really weren't familiar with. And what I wanted initially was no flexing on the top plate. When you plug a tube in or you plug an RCA jack in, I was just so disgusted with cheap chassis in which, everything's flexing, everything's bending, and you can see it all warped and stuff. And I thought, there's no way I want that. So I went with a really thick top plate, 3/16 of an inch. I think it's an industry record.
Yeah, and it's roughly 4.8 millimeters.
Yeah, I think it's almost exactly 4.8. So it's thick, it's heavy. It costs quite a bit to manufacture. It's one of the reasons why the classic line's always been more expensive. But I started building my own prototypes just like this, and I did that because I was just so disgusted with how bad most industry preamplifiers and amplifiers sounded, and DACs for that matter. In fact, they're even worse. And that's how the kit business started, because I ended up with a whole bunch of prototypes, and I thought maybe other people would be interested, and it turns out, yeah, they are. Okay, let's run through the lineup. Oh, and the secret of the extra thick top plate, Charles.
Yep. it provides a really, really good ground plane. If you think of it like it's a wire, it is an incredibly thick gauged wire.
Yeah, because a lot of people who are just getting into building their own gear think of the B+, the high voltage side, as being sort of the source of power for everything. And in a way it is, but it's only half. The other half is the ground return path.
And that's actually where the current is coming from. And we have to remember, in electronics, there's the conventional way, which is actually backwards from the way that everything really works. So all of the current is actually coming through the ground path.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a good ground path, well, you don't have good current supply.
Yeah, and you can have ground loops, you can have noisy power supplies. Anyways, that's a topic for another day. In fact, we've probably done a number of tube labs on that subject. So up first is the stepped attenuator, and the stepped attenuator is the best quality passive volume control that we could design. It's got no gain, so what goes in can come out.
There's no active circuitry in here whatsoever.
Yeah, but what there is a lot of resistors, and essentially every time you turn the volume up, you change to a different resistor value, and believe it or not, the volume is controlled on each channel by only 2 resistors. That's it. So the signal goes in, it has an extremely short signal path, goes through almost no components, and you can control the volume. And you can add this as an upgrade to any of our kits by just simply turning the volume up to max on the kit and controlling the volume. You can put the attenuator before or after, but we find in most cases before works better, but sometimes we've actually found it works better after.
And in the case of our preamps that have more than one input, it does also expand your ability to have more inputs coming into it if
That's
you have
right.
more sources.
You've got 2 pairs of RCAs coming in on a switch, and you have 2 pairs going out live. So if you need to get an extra feed to a subwoofer, for example, this can get it for you. Okay, moving on. This was one of the first kits that we introduced. This is the E80cc Control Preamp, and the whole kit was designed around this amazing 12AU7
Close equivalent, but way better.
Yeah, basically Philips wanted to build a commercial tube for recording studios and for industry that was superior to what they had developed in the 12AU7. And they came up with the E80cc. In fact, earlier we were talking about the 6N6P. The 6N6P
is almost certainly based off of the tube that the E80cc was based off of. They're very similar, they're high current dual triodes, but the Soviets of course put their own little spin on it, and it ended up being a good tube just on its own.
Now this tube ended up in a lot of recording studios in Europe. It's now basically abandoned, and it's rapidly going extinct. But because we always buy inventory in for any kits we introduce, we still have a lot of inventory of the Tungsrams, which is an excellent E80cc, and we have still matched pairs of the original Philips E80cc. So for the foreseeable future, we actually can supply new old stock, and I think the Philips tubes might be mostly good use, but...
No, we have good new old stock of them as well.
We do, excellent.
Yeah. And out of our classic line preamps, this is also a high gain one, and a similar amount of gain to the modern line Rocket. The E80cc actually has higher gain than a standard 12AU7, and in this circuit it has pretty decent gain. I think it's is it 18 or 20?
I forget, but the specs are all in the store. The unique part about this circuit is it's a direct couple circuit. So there's actually no coupling capacitor between the gain stage and the cathode follower stage. So each one of these tubes is a channel, and each one of these tubes are twin triodes. So there's 2 tubes inside one envelope, right? So one stage does the gain, the second stage does the CF, or a cathode follower, and that works out just brilliantly. And this is a dual mono power supply. So there's actually a transformer in here with 2 secondary windings, and there's 2 power supply boards in here. So there's an extreme amount of stereo separation because basically there's 2 mono preamps inside one chassis. And that's, if you want the very best stereo image, the very best sound stage, that's the way to go. And all of our kits do some version of that. And you've got 2 pairs of RCAs in, one pair out, and of course the volume control.
Yeah. Okay, now on to our most popular kit ever. This is, let me see if I can get it better on screen here for you. This is our universal 6 or 12 SN7 control preamp. And this came out of Dad's desire to build a preamp that could run every 6SN7 or 12SN7 that was ever made, because a lot of modern amplifiers will run 6SN7s, but they'll only run the GTAs or the GTBs, not the GTs, and mostly not the 12SN7 versions of them.
And why that's important is because the first generation GTs were fully a third lower in specs right across the board to the later GTA and GTB, and the GTs can be amazing sounding tubes.
And there's lots of them in the 12SN7 still available today, whereas the early 6SN7s are getting to be very unobtainable now.
Yeah, most of them are extinct. The really high demand tubes, like the Sylvania 6SN7 GT, otherwise known as the bad boy, it has the best bass of any 6SN7 or probably any tube ever made. And I don't mean thumpa bass. I mean bass that's detailed, articulate, in which you can hear the beginning of a pluck of a string, the full signal off of the pluck, and then the harmonics afterwards. That bad boy, it does it all. It delivers right across the board, but in the bass frequencies it excels. And believe it or not, we still have new old stock 12SN7 GTs in close match pairs. We're actually, our inventory is getting down, but we still have quite a few of them, and we still have one of the most famous 6SN7s ever made, the tongue saw. And we have a couple of the versions of it. I think we might still have some pairs of mouse ears
we do still have some mouse ears. We have some of the non-mouse ear versions, and we have some of the later angle plate versions as well.
Yeah, and this preamp, until we introduced the modern line phono, this preamp was by far our #1 kit. Everybody who builds it just loves the sound of it. And
it's gone through 3 revisions now where we've improved it slightly each time, and we've even ordered in brand new PCBs with improved labeling on them for this run. And we're still trying to improve it even years after we first released it.
Yeah, I think the very first generation builders got the option to put in a next generation circuit board into it, and we sold them at if we do an upgrade on a kit, we don't do that very often, but if we do it, we make a kit available at a very reasonable price. So builders going way back to the beginning were able to upgrade to the newest generation, which made quite a difference, I think, sonically. And the first generation sounded amazing. So the improvement, though, was all, I think it was almost all in the cathode follower stage.
Yeah. So otherwise, this has the same dual mono power supply as the E80cc. We have switchable inputs, we have a set of RCA outputs, and we have a DC input for being able to switch the filament voltages for these guys.
Yeah, and before we go, you might be wondering, well, what's the difference sonically? And that's easy. The E80cc is a very clean sounding, very fast tube. And if you love detail and you don't want a lot of tubey warmth, then this is going to definitely be for you. Or the Rocket. The Rocket's also, sonically the Rocket's very similar to the 80cc, though the circuit design topology is a little different. And if you love tubey warmth, and you just love the sound of the 6SN7 and the higher voltage 12SN7s,
and you want to roll a huge pile of tubes,
this is without a doubt, this is this is the kit for you. Before we go, let's take a look at the power amps that we've got available.
Yeah, we'll be right back.
Okay, we have 2 monoblocks in the classic line, and we actually have monoblocks in development over in the modern line. In fact, Charles and I are both simultaneously, we each took a project on. So I'm working on a pure Class A solid state monoblock, which will be a first for our company. And there's actually a second prototype built. And that's a long story, so we won't get into it. We're still months away from even finishing the first prototype to a production level.
But they are coming eventually.
They are coming eventually. And Charles is working on an all-tube modern line monoblock as well. But what we do have available is in the classic line, and we have 2 amazing sounding monoblocks. This is the first one we introduced. It's called the Yuri. It's named after the first man in space, Yuri, what was his last name?
Yuri Gagarin, I believe.
Gagarin, yeah. And we did that because the power tube actually was built in Ulyanov, I think.
Ulyanovsk, I believe.
Yeah, and it's an amazing power tube. It's got a top cap, so it's not the top cap designs are perfectly safe if you're responsible and you don't have young kids or pets around. If not, they're really not something I would recommend unless you can put them in a cabinet. Well, you can't put them in a cabinet. So, yeah. So
what, the kids and the cat?
They're not. I love kids. I don't like cats that much. I'm really a dog person.
Yeah. So amps with top caps really aren't for situations where you don't have good control over what's going to be around them.
Yeah.
And this is a really neat tube because this is actually sort of a 6L6 or an 807 in the bottle here. It's very similar to them. It'll actually work in most circuits as long as you can adapt it over. And they're fantastic sounding tubes.
And unlike the 807, which is a pain in the ass to work with, this is a very stable, easy to design around power tube. And it's being driven by a very interesting tube that was originally developed in the early days of the Second World War as a radar tube. It's got a double top cap, and that's just to reduce noise and interference, because of course radar is really critical to have a low noise circuit. And this tube, most of them were, pretty much all of them were built during the Second World War, and because radar advanced really quickly, even in the last days of the war, it became obsolete almost right away. And almost everybody who went to manufacture this tube kept their actual prototype numbers. So CV6 was one of the first numbers in the UK. CV just stands for Common Valve Number 6. That was a military designation. But there are at least,
There's a whole bunch. There's the 7193, which is a U.S. military designation. There's the E1148, which is a prototype designation from the U.S.
E stood for experiment, I think.
Yeah, there's the 6S8S, which was the Soviet designation for it, and 2C22, which I think is another UK or European designation.
Yeah. But the main thing to keep in mind is that this is the preamp driver stage for the power stage. And it's an amazing sounding tube. In fact, we've got customers that use a really crazy looking double adapter, and they'll put 2 of these together per channel or per replacement tube of 6SN7. And it is an amazing sounding 6SN7, but it's only half. So you have to put 2 of them on an adapter to get a 6SN7. But it can be done, and we sell quite a few of them for that purpose. Anyways, this is a pure Class A, all tube, power amp. It needs a control preamp to drive it, of course. It's a low output at about 2.25 watts RMS.
Yeah, so you're going to need efficient speakers, but if you have efficient speakers, these are wonderful.
And with efficient speakers, you can't put this at full volume. You would go deaf. So you can you can easily drive an efficient speaker to normal listening levels. If you're into pool parties and you want a system for that, this is not your amp. But if you have a smaller listening room with very efficient speakers, then this might be all you need. And we still rotate this into our main listening system on a fairly regular basis. When we do it, we're always amazed at how good this little amp sounds.
Yeah, now this is the other amp that we rotate it with.
Now, if you need more power, the GU50 is great. I think it's a little over 10 watts RMS, and people get really confused about watts RMS and what the heck we're talking about. RMS is the
mathematical average for an AC signal
at its efficient power point. So if you've ever bought a power amp that says peak power, what they've done is essentially cheated on the specifications. Peak power basically is twice the power of RMS. And it's one of the things that the bad boys in the industry still do today. And a lot of people say, well, tube watts, they're not the same as solid state watts. And that is absolutely not true. They are the same. But what is different is how a tube amp will clip. And when a tube amp clips, unless it's really overdriven dramatically, it tends to clip so softly you would never even hear it. When a solid state amp clips, it clips fairly hard. Now, I've had discussions over the years with people who say, no. Solid state amps, they clip softly too. Well, if you have a scope and you've ever watched a solid state amp clip, that's not true. Solid state amps, at least the ones I've seen on the scope, they clip pretty hard. And when they do, it's really harsh.
It adds a lot of odd harmonics into it, whereas whenever tube amps clip, they add a fair amount of even harmonics. So it actually just warms up the sound even more. Maybe too much, but you shouldn't ever get to clipping on these anyway.
So like the Yuri, the GU50 is a pure Class A power amp. It needs to be driven from a Control Preamp. And with this setup here, the way it's designed, we're using a 6N6P as a driving tube. So it's both a preamp, it's a driver tube, and with pure Class A, again, we don't have any feedback. This pure Class A, for those of you that don't know, Class A amps essentially run at 100% duty cycle, so there's no phase inversion. The bigger tube gear that's running Class A-B will split the phase into two halves, the top and half phase of the sine wave.
And they'll have two devices that are sharing the load. So they get a break, then they work, then they get a break, then they work. And that allows you to get more power out of them, but it causes distortion at the crossover point.
Yeah, so you don't have any of that. So if you've never heard a Class A power amp, I would say you can define Class A as, and you can do this with solid state amps as well, as the cleanest, clearest sound you've ever heard in your life. And if you come over from a crossover distortion filled solid state or Class AB tube amp, you'll notice immediately the detail level goes up exponentially. It's almost uncanny. And until you get used to it, you'll be like, you won't be able to stop listening because you'll hear your recordings so completely differently.
Yeah, and this guy's using the really neat GU50 power tube. This is an old Soviet production tetrode, I believe, or is it a pentode?
I actually forget, but we've wired it in a very unique way. In fact, I don't think anybody's ever wired this tube the way we did it, and we wired it as a triode. And the way it's strapped just seems to work really well. During development, we had a lot of...
we had a lot of arcing.
I was going to say lightning bolts inside the tube. And
it was exciting.
It was exciting, but it's such a robustly built tube that most of those tubes actually survived our early experiments until we finally figured it all out.
And when you triode strap these, they end up actually performing almost identically to a 300B, which is really kind of interesting, and they sound so good.
Yeah, in fact, among European home builders and amateur designers, they have nicknamed the GU50 the poor man's 300B. And I would agree with them. It's just a stunning sounding tube. It's a pain in the ass. It's got a glass base. You've got to be very careful as to how you install it, or you can crack the base. But once you get it installed, just leave it alone. And I think we pull our tubes about once a year to clean the pins. And other than that, it's just a stunning sounding power amp. And and don't be deceived. Even though it's on a fairly small chassis, it's heavy. There's a lot of iron in this thing, and that's why it's a fairly expensive monoblock, because the iron is where the bucks are. And yeah, so that is the whole lineup of kits. I hope you enjoyed sort of our run through of them. It takes us great joy to visit. It gives us great joy to visit and see all these developments over the years. And even though these are older designs, they sound every bit as good as the day that we clear them for release to the public, or, well, first we go to the test builders. And every single one of the classic line will get a short review before we ship, and you'll probably get a couple of notes saying you might want to do this or that to upgrade the design slightly. But other than that, all the information's in the store. And before we go, we were going to give a tip as to how you can increase
your $50 store credit to something a little bit more.
Quite a bit more, 50% more. And if you go to the very bottom of the email that we sent out, you'll see that there's a crossword puzzle. And Charles and I had a lot of fun making it. But buried in there is a better code, a much better code.
And amazingly, somebody already got it this morning.
Yeah, and
not long after we sent out the email.
I think the emails had only just gotten out. He must have just gotten it, and he must have gone straight to the crossword. So kudos. We won't name whoever that was.
But well done. You must have sprinted through that.
Yeah. So, and ordered a kit right away and took advantage of the code. So well done. And if you didn't get an email and you'd like to do the crossword, or you'd like to get the store credit that's embedded in the email, just drop us a note in the customer contact section of either store, and we'll send you a copy of the email so that you can go ahead and try your hand at the crossword puzzle. It's obviously, we didn't make it hard enough, did we?
No, probably not. Actually, we might even just put a link to the crossword at the bottom of this video here too. That's probably easier.
Yeah, okay, I'll do that as well. This is Jim.
And Charles.
Signing off. Cheers, everyone.